Hey everybody, it's been a while since I've done a video. I've got a ton going on. I've been traveling a ton. It's just a lot. So anyway, Bitcoin is one of the numerous things I'm involved in and certainly the most fun thing to talk about other than Prospera, which is obviously my primary endeavor. So anyway, wanted to give you a quick update of why is Bitcoin's price down this week. Well, when the year started, the Federal Reserve said they were going to lower interest rates 6 times for 1/4 of a point each time, for a total of 1.5% at least. So that's what everybody anticipated, because that's exactly what they told people they were going to do. And I can't remember exactly the timing of that. It may have been, over the last, 6, 12, 18 months. Anyway, there was massive multi-percentage point rate cuts that were anticipated. And obviously they do that by printing a ton of money and other ways. So as the year has worn on, even though Bitcoin is still way up, 50% plus up, in fact, about $20,000 per coin up since the ETFs launched in January, from the mid 40,000s to the mid 60,000s, or I should say mid to high 60,000s. People, as I've said before, heavily base the value of a scarce asset based on the competition of competing scarce assets. Well, a competing scarce asset is the US dollar, which I do not believe is scarce, obviously, because the Federal Reserve never stops printing money. But every time the Federal Reserve says that they've stopped printing money and does a Scout's honor promise that they're not going to print as much as they previously thought, well, then Bitcoin takes a temporary dive while everybody's like, oh, maybe the Federal Reserve is now super responsible and humans are just not going to debase the money supply anymore. Well, that's ridiculous, because at no time in the entirety of human history have humans been able to resist the urge to debase the money when humans had the power to print more of the money supply. In whatever form it took, whether clipping the corners off of, or the edges off of gold coins, debasing which, gold, silver, or whatever was in supposedly gold or silver coins. Governments who controlled money have never, ever in the history of humanity been responsible with that power. So I think it's a great time to buy Bitcoin, because I obviously do not believe that the Federal Reserve is just going to magically stop money printing, and the Federal Reserve is claiming that they are only going to do a 1/4 of 1 percentage point rate cut this year. That's 0.25%, and that's all they're planning on doing this entire year. So why do I believe that's not going to happen? For a couple reasons. One, we've already covered. Reason number one, humans have never resisted the urge to print money when they have that power. There's just too much desire to create money out of thin air when you have the ability to do that. So number one, it would require humans to no longer be sinful and to be able to resist the urge to print the magic money and run the magic money printer, which would be the first time in human history that has happened. So first off, I know that's not going to happen because it's never happened in history. Second, with interest rates as high as they are right now, there's trillions of dollars in debt that was financed at very low interest rates that is going to come due. And when it comes due, it's going to have to be refinanced at much higher interest rates. A lot of that debt is interest only, which means if you pay for something and, the interest on the debt is $500 a month or $1,000 a month, or maybe for a business, $20,000 a month, and suddenly debt that you had, financed at 3% now costs 9%, the expense of that debt is now obviously going to triple, because, whatever that cost is now 3 times as high, because you're having to refinance at 9% or 10% or 12%. Business borrowing is especially expensive right now, but even consumer borrowing is very expensive. So when all of that debt tries to refinance, a bunch of businesses are going to start failing. And as they start failing, the only temporary solution is to lower interest rates by printing a bunch more money. And so, number one, they're going to print more money because they can and they want to. Number two, they're going to print more money because it's going to be the logical, in their minds, the logical thing to do when everything starts breaking as a result of the interest rates being so high. The third reason is because high interest rates eventually make the United States itself go bankrupt. And the reason for that is we have $34 trillion of debt, most of which was financed at near zero interest rates. So over time, as that debt matures, they finance, or I should say they borrow more money to pay off the old money, which is like a classic definition of a Ponzi scheme. But they have to borrow that new money at 4 or 5% interest rather than the old money, which is coming due, which may have been financed at 0.25% or 1.2% or very low interest rates. So as a result of that, the interest on the debt for the United States is already more than $1 trillion a year. And that's on top of the deficit, which is, from everything other than interest, which is already in the trillions. So there's just no way the United States can remain viable under a debt load of more than 35 trillion dollars at an interest rate above 5%. When they have to finance above 4 or 5%, the interest on that debt, which you can calculate it by 4% of 35 trillion or 34 trillion or 5% of one of those numbers or whatever, that interest on the debt gets added to the debt every year, and it just creates a debt snowball that essentially is the reason, countries lose their greatness. So they're eventually going to have to lower interest rates because the debt burden is going to force them to, because the interest on the debt is essentially going to start bankrupting the country, which is kind of already doing. And the longer they let high interest rates run, the more that happens. And then the fourth reason, so to recap, they are humans and they are fallible and they are sinful, and therefore they will print money. The second reason is because the economy will start breaking as a result of the over-leveraged, over-debt burdened everybody from individuals to businesses having to refinance at much higher rates. The third reason is because America itself will go bankrupt if they keep interest rates high enough for long enough without curbing spending, and we know that they're not going to curb spending, so that's never going to happen. And then the fourth reason, of course, is the presidential elections coming later this year. And the easiest way of creating the appearance of economic prosperity is with sort of a tissue fire, flash in the pan sort of activity, and money printing does that. When you lower rates, you get a short-term euphoria as everybody's enjoying the extra free money that's sloshing around in the economy. That tends to make it easier for whoever the incumbent president is to win re-election. And since Joe Biden is the incumbent president, and because the Federal Reserve is supposed to be independent, but that's obviously it's not. You've got U.S. senators sending letters to the Federal Reserve telling them what to do, and the Federal Reserve, at the end of the day, is supposed to be independent, but it's mostly just a farce. So anyway, at some point, Joe Biden and the people in Washington will tell the Federal Reserve to turn on the money printer to create a late year rally in the stock market, in the hopes that enhances Joe Biden's probability of winning re-election. So in the midterm, the Federal Reserve will probably signal that they intend to keep monetary policy tight. They're doing that to try to curb inflation, although I think the inflation that they have caused is going to be inevitable, meaning I think we're going to get the inflation from all the past money printing inevitably, no matter what they do. They're just delaying it by pretending in the interim to be super responsible, but they've never been able to maintain that, supposedly responsible monetary policy, certainly not through the dot-com boom, certainly not through the 2008 recession, and certainly not through whatever sort of recession we get in the next year or two here as a result of everybody, starting to crumble under incredibly high prices as a result of inflation and high debt burden as a result of borrowing a bunch of cheap money back when money was cheap and interest rates were low, and now having to refinance at much higher prices. So as a result of that, Bitcoin right now is at just above $66,000 per coin. My anticipation of what will happen is it'll take a few days or weeks or however long for people to wake up and realize, hey, maybe the Federal Reserve actually is not going to be as responsible as they're claiming they're going to be. I think it's laughable that people think they're actually going to be responsible and keep monetary policy tight, especially when they've never historically done that, when it was painful. And it's going to get painful. And so when it does get painful, I have a hard time believing that they're going to keep interest rates high when it actually is super painful to do that. So anyway, as a result of that, I think it's only a matter of time till the money printing gets cranked back up. And regardless, Bitcoin is still the most amazing financial asset that humans have ever created, or that anyone has ever created, whether stock, bond, commodity, real estate, anything. Bitcoin is the monetary properties and store of value, medium of exchange, and unit of account properties of Bitcoin are so amazing that adoption of Bitcoin continues to march on. And as adoption continues to march on, so eventually will the price. So just recently, Australia is launching Bitcoin ETFs. Thailand's launching Bitcoin ETFs. The UK in the last few weeks launched Bitcoin ETFs, and the culture and mood in Washington, D.C. has shifted significantly in favor of cryptocurrencies, specifically Bitcoin. So as a result of that, the adoption of Bitcoin will continue. And as the adoption continues, eventually that is reflected in the price. So I still think we're, probably got a good shot of $120,000 to $150,000 per coin by the end of the year. By the end of this year, 2024, I think it's probably, certainly by mid to late next year if it doesn't happen by the end of this year. But I don't know. It's, a lot can happen, and who knows. So I'm in it for the long haul, and my strategy of direct depositing straight into Bitcoin, spending money with the Coinbase debit card, and accumulating as much Bitcoin as I possibly can. That strategy is working fantastically well, and the price of Bitcoin is still, radically higher than the vast majority of the Bitcoin I bought, even though I do own some Bitcoin that I bought for more than $66,000 a coin. And there's no bad price to buy Bitcoin. So even the Bitcoin I bought at $68,000 per coin, I've spent some of that when the price was above $68,000 a coin. And who cares? Because with a little patience, it'll be back above $68,000 and into the 70s and into the 80s and 90s and beyond. So it's all good. It's just a matter of patience. So the upside of all of this is Bitcoin is providing you and everyone else some additional time to buy additional Bitcoin. So if you were planning to buy additional Bitcoin, you have been granted the wish of having more time to do that. Now, most people are staring at the price of Bitcoin. They're saying, it's no fun to buy stuff when it doesn't feel like it's going up. And a lot of people are going to regret not having bought a lot more Bitcoin when it was in the 60,000s like it is right now. But you can choose to not be one of those people and load up on a bunch of Bitcoin if you feel so inclined. So the future and the outlook for Bitcoin is as bright as it's ever been. And we are, 2 months now, not quite 2 months after the halving. That was in April. And so the supply and demand mismatch has to adjust. It's just a matter of time, and it's just a matter of all of the supply and demand forces ultimately settling in a way that results in the price eventually realizing the momentum in the marketplace of adoption and scarcity and everything else, which it always eventually does. So I think now's a great time to buy Bitcoin. I think we've all been given more time to accumulate in the 60,000s. I do not think the Federal Reserve is any more responsible now than they have been in the past. I think the likelihood of a massive recession in the next year or two is as high as it's ever been. And I think the outlook for Bitcoin is as bright as it's ever been as well. So hit me up with any questions, drop them in the chat. Text me at 601-207-0813 if you got questions. I love answering questions, whether by text message, again, 601-207-0813. Text me questions, message me on Facebook. Just make sure you're messaging the real me and not a fake account with my name on it. And or drop your questions or comments in the questions and comments of this video, and I will get to them there as well. And if you've asked a question in the past that I haven't answered, ask me again, because it means it somehow slipped through the cracks. I try to make sure nothing slipped through the cracks, but I got a lot going on, so not everything is attended to perfectly all the time. So anyway, let me know. Always here to help, and I'm always here for anything you could possibly need. Hopefully this video, as the others, is helpful. Thanks.